knows the dominance at the restrictor plate tracks Dale Jr. and Jeff Gordon accomplished in the early 2000s. It's safe to say when it came to those tracks, the 8 car and the 24 were going to be going for the lead at some point in the race. But in this video, I wanted to go back and relive their dominance, mostly the 2004 NASCAR Nextel Cup year, where at every restrictor plate race, either Dale Jr. or Jeff Gordon won. So let's take a look. It starts off in February in the Daytona 500, where Dale Jr. is having another great speed weeks. After a late charge that came up short in the 2004 Budweiser shootout, he then dueled with Tony Stewart to win the Gatorade 125 duel and then the Daytona 500. Many people forget that in the field, got strung out, Jeff Gordon was in the mix. He didn't have the fastest car, but he was still there. Something Jeff always did really well, depending on the handling of his car, was either stay in the back or push towards the front. And in this race, he was kind of pushing towards the front most of the race. They dueled mostly during the middle of the race and the beginning of the race, where Dale Jr. was pretty much up front most of the race. This race was really dominated by Tony Stewart, but Jeff Gordon and Dale Earnhardt Jr. were there till the very end. But Dale Jr. would position himself to take the lead with 19 laps to go from Tony Stewart, and of course go on to win his first of 2 Daytona 500 victories. Let's talk about the very next race, which is the most controversial race, I think, in this whole series, and that would be the 2004 Aaron's 499. This was one example of Dale Jr. versus Jeff Gordon showdown that was really showcased their skills. Well, early in the race, the machine that was leading the most was Jeff Gordon and Dale Jr. taking turns. They were swapping most of the whole time, with Jeff Gordon running his blue 24 iconic Pepsi car. This was one of my favorite Jeff Gordon paint schemes he would ever drive. And knowing how fast and strong the 8 car was, Jeff Gordon would make a run on Dale Jr. and would pretty much door him, almost turning Dale Jr. off to turn 4. As Dale Jr. lost the lead, he would continue to fight back, and he was flying towards the front. And he would find himself in turn 3 right next to Jeff Gordon, as Jeff Gordon's teammate Brian Vickers spun out with 6 to go. And this is where the controversy really began. The race was never restarted again, even though there were 6 laps to go. They gave the win over to Jeff Gordon, with Dale Jr. finishing second. This race was so hated by fans that when Jeff Gordon was doing his burnouts, they were throwing literal beer and water at him. But what I never understood is why weren't fans more upset with NASCAR, and why were they more upset with Jeff Gordon? I understand Jeff Gordon almost turned him, but as a junior fan, this one really stung. The next race on the calendar was the return to Daytona for the Pepsi 400, a race many people know because of Dale Jr.'s 2001 race, but this race would be Jeff Gordon in his now silver Pepsi Million car, and it was super fast. Of course, the 8 car was right there, coming up short to a wacky Friday night Busch race, which ended up being him put in the wall by Jason Leffler. Just as a FYI, he made me cry that night. Also, if you're going to block and wreck people, make sure you win the race, but that's beside the point. Back to the Cup race. Jeff Gordon would roll off on the first position, which showed the muscle of the 24 car with Jimmy Johnson right next to him. You wouldn't have to look too far behind to see the 2 DEI cars. For the first half of the race, the DEI cars was the fastest, mostly Michael Waltrip leading Dale Jr. Jeff and his teammate Jimmy Johnson weren't too far behind. After a near race ending scare, the 8 car on pit road was shuffled back once again to pass at the halfway point. The 2 Henner cars were up front most of the race, and they would stay there. In the end, it was Jeff Gordon, from help from his teammate, who would take the checkered flag in his second restricted place race in a row. Now, it's important to know, and you probably noticed it in the Talladega race, some things that both drivers did differently. Back in those days, it was easy to see the difference between the 2 cars and the 2 drivers. When Jeff Gordon was fast at a super speedway, he always had a car that was so fast down the straightaways that it was hard to pass him. But the 8 car was just so much faster in the corners, and when he was fast, it was like he was never even affected by the corners, and would just pull away from everyone running a half lane higher. Lastly, we have the 2004 EA Sports 500. Dale Jr. started in the top 10, and he would lead very early in the race. After finishing second to his teammate Michael Waltrip the year before, the 8 car was back and ready for vengeance. He was the dominant car throughout the race, and went on to lead most of the laps, but when it came to the 24, they would race side by side throughout the early and middle parts of the race, with the 8 car getting the better of the 24. Early in the race, the 24 was a real threat for Jr., but the 24 seemed like he couldn't keep up with handling, and while Jeff faded, Jr. stayed put. He wouldn't be without a battle, though. With a couple laps to go, the caution came out, and Dale Jr. took 2 tires. That put him back with only a handful of laps to go, but when the green came out, he quickly maneuvered his 8 car to show why he was the best in the business. He quickly sliced through the field, making his own lines, and got up front with under 5 laps to go. From there, the cars would just make a charge, but they wouldn't come up close to the 8 car. As they came to the final lap, Jeff Gordon was in the middle of the field and was involved a little bit in a wreck. As they came down to take the checkered flag, for the second straight year, Elliott Sadler was spun and turned upside down coming to the flag. Now this goes out with saying that the difference in the races and the different dominance of these two cars every single time they were in NASCAR at the super speedways. But this year in particular, they came to every super speedway and it was the 24 in the 8 car who took the lead. And as these two races figured out, they just continued to get stronger, but as we know, the next couple of years the 8 car would fade quickly as Jeff Gordon would still keep up his momentum. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you guys liked the video. This was my first ever NASCAR content type video, but just let me know if you like it, and see you later. Peace.